You are listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul. Let's get to the show. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul, and I am in addiction recovery. We are moving right along into the summer, and for those of you out there who've been following me and been paying attention, you know that a few weeks ago I talked about how we were going to start really focusing in on our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects of our recovery journey. And so this episode is going to be about open-mindedness and the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And the reason why this is so important to me right now is that I have been in the process of writing my book on college success habits for my other podcast, also called College Success Habits. And my first key principle to having a positive habit creation structure in your life is being open-minded. And so I've been using a lot of growth mindset strategies in my sobriety and recovery since pretty much day one without necessarily realizing it. You see, I see open-mindedness stemming from two different kinds of mindsets, growth and fixed. Now, there's a book out there called by Carol Dweck called Mindset, and she goes extensively into this subject. In fact, I really took a lot of my inspiration about growth mindset that I use every day in my sobriety and recovery from this book. But it wasn't until about 6 months into my sobriety journey that I even came across this book. Since it was introduced to me, I've found it being mentioned on countless amounts of podcasts and blogs that I read. And so it would have found its way to me one way or another. I'm just glad it found its way to me when it did. Because when I stepped into my sobriety and recovery journey, I went into it with an open mind, with a growth mindset that it was going to be a lot of work. There was going to be some setbacks. Not relapse kind of setbacks, but there was just going to be setbacks, whether it be physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually in my journey that I was going to have to be prepared for in the best way possible. And the way I see it is that having a growth mindset is the best way to be prepared, because you're never going to be able to see every single kind of scenario that could possibly arise. You just have to be fluid in your thinking so that you can really adjust and pivot in a moment's notice, depending on the kind of situation you find yourself in, right? So when this book found me, the way I see it, just the right moment in my sobriety journey and in my life's journey in general, really, it brought about in me the idea behind having a growth mindset means that I'm ready to learn new things whenever presented with them, right? I'm ready to hear somebody else's opinion, even if it's different than my own, because I'm going to learn something new about them or about the subject at hand. If you've gone to meetings, and no doubt you have, you realize it is a very wide array of people in that room, all with addiction in common. And you may have to hear somebody's turn to speak, and you may not agree with what they say, but it's their journey, and you're just a part of it in that moment as they tell their story, right? Just being open and ready to listen to somebody else's story, somebody else's point of view. Think about the way our politics is in this country. It's very divisive. If you can just hear somebody else's side, and I'm not great at this, I definitely can, bury my feet in the ground and try to push back. And then I just hopefully in the moment say, no, be growth mindset, be fluid, hear them out. Even if you don't agree with them, just hear them out, because everybody wants to be heard. And if you're going to be in that conversation with them, you should give them that respect. And I've certainly caught myself not doing it. And it's always my hope that I can figure it out in the moment and start to grow into that situation. So why having an open mindset is important is because you want to be the person who sees hurdles as an opportunity for growth into a new version of you, but not as a barrier meant to dissuade you from moving forward. Recently, someone on Instagram had posted that they had relapsed multiple times, and they were now, rebooting the whole sobriety journey again. And it was really great seeing the comments that people were posting And it was on one of my posts. I think it was the last green one that I did. It was just really great to see people offering positive affirmations. There's only a few, and other people posted some other stuff that wasn't necessarily connected to that comment, pushing that person into a growth mindset mentality, even though they weren't using this kind of language. That's what's important. You don't necessarily have to use the same language I am. It just have similar actions of a growth mindset. If you examine yourself, you will notice that there are areas in your life where you have a growth mindset and areas where you have a fixed mindset. If you have experience doing something, you'll tend more on the growth mindset side. If you lack experience in an area, you'll tend toward a fixed mindset. In the area of sobriety and recovery, we will often feel a lot of emotions in the process. Can I get an amen on that? You're going to feel a lot of emotions in the process, and that can seem overwhelming, but let's look at it from a growth mindset aspect. Overwhelm is also a mindset. If you feel like you can really handle anything thrown your way, you will, through your actions and your discipline, be able to handle whatever's thrown your way. But if you feel that you can, will, or do get overwhelmed, if you feel that you can get overwhelmed, will get overwhelmed, you do get overwhelmed, then your default will be to feel overwhelmed. And then that mindset takes on a personality of its own, and you'll just find yourself overwhelmed a lot. Within sobriety and recovery, it's important to reel in that overwhelmed feeling because we're experiencing things through a whole new prism. One of sobriety, one of abstinence from addictive substances. Hopefully, it's also an abstinence away from those behaviors that we showed to the world and to ourselves when we were on addictive substances. One of the most difficult things that I have is understanding my emotions. I don't understand them. I often get confused by them. Just because they come at me doesn't necessarily mean that I agree that that's what it really is. Back in the day, I just speak my mind and say whatever I felt whenever, regardless of how that might make others feel. And then 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days later, I wouldn't even feel that same way. I would look back and be like, what the hell did I say that for? What the hell did I think that was the feeling I was feeling at that moment? Why was it that emotion I decided to show? Because looking back on it, I didn't really feel that way. I really wasn't angry. Maybe I was agitated or annoyed, but I didn't need to say what I said in that moment. That was a very emotional time. My therapist likes to say that addicts lacked impulse control. And so one of the things I put a lot of energy into now in my recovery is having impulse control. Just because I feel it at the moment doesn't mean that that's how I really feel. I run it through a filter of, is this a right now emotion and feeling, or is it a real emotion or feeling? And I really, really believe that the growth mindset's what's allowed me to come up with those kind of questions for myself. Stop, think, evaluate, and then move forward. So what is a growth mindset? A growth mindset is the ability to see everything as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to experience from. That any ability and skill can be developed no matter your background, your current abilities, your current knowledge, no matter what it is. You can learn to be happy in your sobriety and recovery. It may not feel like that on day 1 or 5 months or 5 years even. You can have those times where you're like, I just need to get intoxicated. Right? But that's a right this second emotion. Is that how you're going to feel in 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days? Probably not. I'd be willing to bet 100% not. You'll fluctuate through that. What is halt? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you feel those, halt and then reconsider why it is you want to use in that moment and think of a different way to use. That's a growth mindset. Being able to stop yourself in your tracks from doing a habitual behavior in favor of something that you know is more positive for you and you know that's going to leave you feeling happier about yourself, that's a growth mindset, guys. A fixed mindset is believing that your skills, your talents, your knowledge, your ability to be sober, your ability to be happy around other people who are being intoxicated is unattainable. That being fixed means that you cannot grow, that you cannot cultivate a new life for yourself. You don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. A growth mindset realizes every single opportunity in life is a chance for growth. And then if your mind is open to it, you will learn something new. You'll experience something new that you had not even previously considered. I mean, that is like the essence of sobriety and recovery. That is the essence of our journey. 2.5 years into it, I catch myself still acting and behaving like I did when I was an addict. Yes, I'm not intoxicated anymore, and I definitely get that other people who aren't battling addiction are going through these similar things. But the prism, the glasses that we're seeing this from is different than other people because we're seeing it through this addictive mindset that we once had. We're now relearning all of these new things through a sobriety prism. I'm still doing things for the first time that I haven't done sober since I was a little kid, and it was illegal for me to drink or do drugs. You know, I go to an amusement park. It's the first time I've done it sober. You know, go to a music festival. First time I've done one of those sober. You know, go to a play. Only done 2 or 3 of those sober. Used to go to those things intoxicated all the time. Each time I do it, it's still new. It's still wildly entertaining to me. A growth mindset is the ability to learn constantly and see the full potential of everything around us, the full potential of our lives, and to arrive at an outcome from hundreds, if not thousands, of different directions. Everyone has their own sobriety and recovery journey. To sit here and say, if you don't do it through AA or SMART or Refuge or Kaiser or whatever, that's the only way that it's going to work. I mean, that's an ignorant mindset because you know that's not true. I've read that AA has an 80% relapse rate. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, other than what I read in this article and where they're getting their data from. So no doubt that the other ones also have an 80% relapse rate. But again, that's not a failure on those programs. 20% of the people are making it through. And maybe every time you relapse and step back into it, you have a better opportunity of succeeding. I mean, it sort of sucks that relapse can be seen as failure, when in reality, we're going to take lots of steps forward in our journey, and we're going to have to take steps backwards in order to evaluate the steps forward that we just made. To run them through a filter of, is this working for me? Is this working for the people around me? Is this going to be something I can maintain? I had a great conversation with a fellow recovery podcaster just a few days ago, and he had a great philosophy that, you know, you might take 30 steps forward and then take 15 steps back. But look at it as if you were painting a house. If you don't take those 15 steps back, you can't see that the trim's not straight. You can't see that your brush strokes are uneven. You have to take a step back to evaluate. So don't necessarily see, if you've been one of these people who's relapsed and are restarting your journey, don't see it as a failure. See it as feedback for what you could be doing differently and perhaps quote unquote better the next time. A growth mindset is being able to meet someone new from a different nationality, with a different accent, with a different background, with a different upbringing, different beliefs, values than you, and getting along with them. But it's also being able to realize that you have a different background. You have different experiences. You have different things in your life that you've experienced and gone through since you first got into sobriety and recovery. Each day is this new version of you. And when you go to these meetings and you meet someone, like I just explained, that's different with race, creed, color, all that stuff, don't just naturally assume that you can't learn something from them because they didn't have the same history that led you both to the same place. Because you're in the same place. Kinetic energy alone brought you together in that moment. Be growth mindset and learn something from them. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had where I've thought, well, I can't wait to have a deeper conversation with this person later. And then that conversation never happened. But because I was present and I was in the moment and I was with them in that conversation, I heard one sentence, one little nugget of knowledge that I got into my brain and I expanded upon it. Nothing that you're doing in your sobriety and recovery journey should ever be considered a failure, should ever be considered losing, should ever be considered not great. No, my words are failing me there. I didn't finish that strong. I think what I really want to get through to everybody is something that I really believe within myself, that there is no failure, there's only feedback. When I read on Instagram of people relapsing, it's like they're beating themselves up so badly. And I don't want them to do that. I don't want you to do that. Death is the ultimate if we can't overcome our addiction. If you relapse and then you sobered up and you said, okay, let's do this again, let's try this again, then you're still in feedback mode. The only failure comes from the death, right? Like, okay, so that maybe there's one instance where there is some failure and it's not just feedback, death, because you get no more opportunities for feedback. And I want everyone to have an opportunity for feedback. And I really want those people out there who have relapsed recently to not feel like they've missed out on an opportunity. You just gained valuable knowledge about how to do it differently the next time. So let's talk about how to have a growth mindset, right? We went over why having a growth mindset is important, because you want to be someone who can see things from 1,000 different perspectives. You want to be fluid in your thinking and not rigid, so that you can be able to maneuver through all these different scenarios that are going to come up whenever you're in sobriety and recovery. We've discussed how a growth mindset is the ability to see everything as an opportunity and learn, grow, and experience from it, whereas a fixed mindset is believing that you can't learn more than you already know, that you can't grow past where you're at today, and that you've already experienced everything that there is. And we know that's just ridiculous. We know that there's always more experiences coming. So how to have a growth mindset? First of all, realize your intelligence, your abilities, your skills, your talents, everything about you can grow and develop into whatever you want it to. You can grow and develop in any way you decide. But see, if you have a fixed mindset around your abilities to do this, to grow, to experience, to learn new skills, talents, abilities, if you have a fixed mindset around that, then you will probably not even try to take on something new to begin with. See, you already know you have a growth mindset when it comes to sobriety and recovery because you're willing to step into it, even if it was just for a day. The fact that you're thinking, I can have a better life if I just stop using, already says that you have a growth mindset. It might be just this little whisper, whereas for other people, it sounds like a gigantic roar. But the more you step into the growth mindset, the more of a roar it will become. A cub has a very tiny roar. A full-grown lion who's been through tons of experiences and probably had to go through many a battle to maintain his pride, that's one loud-ass roar. So don't look at the experiences as setbacks. Look at them as the only way you can grow. I mean, time and time again, I have read about how scientists, inventors, computer science hobbyists, musicians, athletes, just name it, push themselves through this perceived barrier they had in their minds about their abilities. And they came out on the other side with a new invention, a new record, a new personal best, new, better, something. Think about Usain Bolt. Dude had a crazy awesome growth mindset. Would break his record. He'd break a record, then break his own record. He'd start smiling for the cameras, 10, 20 meters before he even crossed the finish line. Nothing worth having in life is ever going to come easy. Nothing that ever changed the world was the first incarnation of that idea that came to mind. Nothing about your sobriety and recovery is necessarily quote-unquote easy. There will be parts where it seems like you're just sort of on cruise control, no big deal. There'll be other parts where, especially, let's look at my emotions again, where it feels like I'm just going to jackhammer and the cement just will not break. But it will if I continue with it and work hard at it and use that jackhammer. The point is that I keep trying. That I realize that, it may not be easy now. A year from now, whatever I'm going through will be easier then. It may never just be smooth sailing, but it will be easier because I will have gone through those experiences. As you begin to complete these things, learn these things, grow into this new you will grow your discipline and you will grow your abilities. It's a positive feedback loop. As you do things, you learn new things. And then you realize you can learn and do new things all the time. And so once you get that feedback loop going, you're like, wow, okay, I did it once, I can do it again. Sure, this is a different area of my sobriety and recovery, or just a different area of my life in general. But now that I've known that if I put forth the effort, if I get into action mode, I stay disciplined and try at it every single day, that my abilities will increase and I will get better. See, creating that loop will become this self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is amazing. That is just so amazing about our minds. That when you create this positive feedback loop, it feeds upon itself. You will know you can grow because you are growing, which will fuel further growth. One of my favorite sayings is that you are either growing in the sunshine or you're dying in the shade. You decide every time whether you're in the sunshine or you're in the shade. That's a fact. You can Google it. So, for those of you who got some questions, what if you're having some problems or some difficulties with being growth mindset versus fixed mindset? Ask yourself, is what you're experiencing right now a fixed way of thinking or just a lack of prioritization? See, not being able to prioritize something is not a negative thing. In fact, knowing what you can and cannot prioritize, now that is a huge part of a positive habit creation, courageous, and decisive mindset. It's not that you don't have time for something. It's that you aren't prioritizing it over something else. If you have to go to work versus go to the lake and jet ski and you choose work, it's not that you don't have time to go jet ski on the lake. You've just chosen work. Probably a good idea, so if you're going to have a roof over your head and one day you could go jet skiing. It's all about prioritization. If you say, oh man, I have to go to my kids' play over going to an AA meeting, there's a prioritization there. Could you go to a meeting at a different time? Is your kids' play showing at a different time? Look at how you could shuffle around your schedule so everything has its moment in the sun, but you're able to prioritize what needs to be prioritized in that moment. Not being able to prioritize something isn't a negative thing. You just have to know what needs to be prioritized when. It's not that you don't have enough time in your day to do all the things that you want. It's that you can only prioritize so many things in your day, or your week, or your month, or your year, in your life. I would love to have 25 different jobs, but I don't have the prioritization in my schedule to pull it off. I would love to be a Super Bowl winning MVP quarterback, but I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed. I'm in my 40s. So ask yourself, what is it that you really want? What is it you really want from your sobriety, from your recovery, from your relationships, from your physical fitness, from yourself, from your career? Be disciplined, make a decision, act upon it, have the courage to follow through, and be flexible as things start playing out. That's growth mindset. Have a growth mindset enough to just start. That's it. That's all you've got to do. Is you just got to start. Because it's in that starting that, one, you prove to yourself that you can, which is a growth mindset predicator. But it's also in that by starting, the experience begins to unfold in front of you. And then you can determine which way you're going to go. And just please remember, you can only prioritize so many things in your life. Your life is all in prioritization. See, I realize that within my growth mindset, I'm going to have these days where I can prioritize something for a day, a week, a month. And then I can determine down the line if it was the best use of my time, if it was the best thing for me, if it was serving me. And that's great. Now I know. There's no indecisiveness there. I made a decision. I got further along into it. Then I realized whether it was or wasn't something I should be doing, and I moved on. I made a new decision. I changed directions. I pivoted, and I grew through it, and I learned. That's what your sobriety and recovery journey is all about. Being able to pivot, make new decisions, and move on that. It's not quitting because you decided to change your mind about the way you were doing something. It's just reprioritizing. I don't want anyone out there to think that relapsing is something that I'm giving them permission to do. I'm not doing that. Hear me out one more time. I am not giving you permission to relapse. But I'm also telling you that if you do relapse, you didn't quit on your sobriety and recovery. You just had a stumble. You misprioritized something in that moment, and you can get back on the wagon, right? It's getting on the wagon, falling off the wagon's drinking, getting on the wagon's not. You can get back up on the horse and you can continue to move forward. If you're on a diet and all of a sudden you slip and you have a piece of cake, doesn't mean that you should just devour an entire cake. You misprioritized in that moment, learn from it, figure out what part of halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, you didn't do as well as you could have, and then learn from the experience and move forward. Having a growth mindset just means that you are open and willing to try, do, and experience new things and then grow through those experiences. If you want a more growth mindset mentality, then you just start putting yourself in situations where you have to grow. You know when you go to a meeting, you're going to grow. You know when you go to see your therapist, you're going to grow. You know whenever you sit in your own emotional stew, even if it's uncomfortable, you're going to grow. Have those hard conversations with your loved ones, you're going to grow. You're going to learn. And eventually, these new experiences become the default behavior, not the exception. Having these tough conversations become the norm. Being able to step into the uncomfortable and get out of your comfort zone becomes the norm. That's really, when I look back at my last 2.5 years of this journey, being out of my comfort zone just seems to be a place I can naturally flow into. It does not mean that I'm always ready to talk about my emotions. It does not mean that I'm not going to slip up and have some Oreos whenever I'm supposed to be watching my calories that week. It doesn't mean that my morals and ethics and values, my integrity, my humility, my gratitude are always in check. I'm running things through those filters all the time. Am I being grateful? Am I being humble? Am I living a life of integrity? Am I practicing the kind of morals, virtues, and ethics that I have set aside and set up for myself in this journey? If not, where could I have done better? Grow, learn, experience new things. There is no failure. There's only feedback. Speaking of feedback, I would love nothing more than if you would go and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on whatever your favorite podcasting app is, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening to me, go give me some love. I'm working within a game somebody else created here. I don't necessarily demand that you do that, but the algorithm does. The algorithm does. I've been getting a ton of love on my Instagram page at From Sobriety to Recovery. By all means, DM me there. Leave a comment in one of my posts. I put some really cool emotionally uplifting quotes. I put in a little story to me about what that speaks to me about. So by all means, jump on there. Give me some feedback about that. I'd love a couple stars, perhaps 5, over on iTunes. It always looks good when other people find me to know that people are enjoying the show enough to leave some feedback. As always, please have a growth mindset. Live, learn, love. It's an amazing experience. Please be positive with your energy in your sobriety and recovery journey. I am honored that you spent this time with me today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And until we see each other again next week, take care and be well.